The first sound Emily heard after 26 hours of labor wasn't her baby's cry. It was the cold rustle of legal papers being placed on her hospital bed. She was still catching her breath, still feeling the overwhelming rush of bringing life into the world, when Thomas walked into the room with an expression she had never seen before. Not concern for his wife, who had just endured the most difficult experience of her life. Not joy at meeting his newborn son, just cold, calculated certainty. "Sign these," he said, dropping a manila envelope beside her trembling hands. "I want a divorce." Emily stared at him through the haze of exhaustion and pain medication. Her newborn son, barely 10 minutes old, and still being examined by nurses across the room. The fluorescent hospital lights made everything feel surreal, like she was watching someone else's life fall apart in slow motion. "The baby doesn't look like me," Thomas continued, his voice devoid of the warmth that had once made her fall in love with him. "I had a DNA test done. I know what you did, Emily. I know about your affair." The accusation hit her like a physical blow. But what surprised Emily most was that she felt no urge to defend herself, no desperate need to explain or plead or cry. Instead, she felt something cold and calculating settle in her chest, something that had been growing there for months, waiting for exactly this moment. The accusation hit her like a physical blow. But what surprised Emily most was that she felt no urge to defend herself, no desperate need to explain or plead or cry. Instead, she felt something cold and calculating settle in her chest, something that had been growing there for months, waiting for exactly this moment. "Where do I sign?" Emily asked quietly, her voice steady despite everything falling apart around her. Thomas looked surprised by her calm response, but he opened the envelope anyway. Emily Chen Morrison had always been the type of woman who played the long game. As a biotechnology researcher with a PhD from Stanford, she approached problems methodically, gathering data before making decisions. So when she first suspected her husband was cheating 6 months into her pregnancy, she didn't confront him immediately. Instead, she investigated. The evidence had been almost embarrassingly easy to find. Thomas wasn't particularly careful about covering his tracks. Late-night texts from the office, weekend business trips that didn't appear on his company calendar, and most damning of all, credit card charges for expensive dinners at restaurants Emily had never been to. When she finally hired a private investigator, the photos came back within a week. Thomas and his boss, Janet Morrison, sharing intimate moments that made Emily's stomach turn. But Emily had learned something important during her years in research. The best experiments required patience. You didn't reveal your findings until you had gathered all the data, tested every hypothesis, and prepared for every possible outcome. So she waited, and she planned, and she let Thomas believe he was the one orchestrating their marriage's end. The DNA test results, Thomas was so confident about, told a different story than he expected. Emily's college roommate Marcus now worked in genetic analysis and owed Emily more favors than either of them could count. A small manipulation of the lab results, some carefully planted evidence, and Thomas had exactly the proof he thought he needed to justify what he was already planning to do. What Thomas didn't know was that Emily had been documenting everything, not just his affair, but his financial indiscretions, his lies to their friends and family, and most importantly, his plan to leave her penniless while she was at her most vulnerable. As she signed those divorce papers in her hospital bed, Emily wasn't ending her marriage, she was beginning her revenge. Before we dive into Emily's incredible journey of transformation, I want you to be part of this story. Please subscribe to The Storyteller, hit that like button if you're feeling this story, and let me know in the comments which country and city you're watching from. Your support means everything, and I promise this story will blow your mind. The first month after the divorce was brutal, but not for the reasons Thomas expected. While he had calculated that Emily would be devastated, desperate, and financially dependent, She was actually executing a plan she had been developing for months. The small apartment she rented wasn't a step down from their suburban home. It was a strategic choice, located 15 minutes from the city's best startup accelerator and walking distance from her new pediatrician's office. Dr. James Rodriguez had been recommended by Emily's obstetrician, but what made him special wasn't just his medical expertise. It was the way he looked at baby Noah during their first visit. Not with the clinical detachment Emily had expected, but with genuine warmth and curiosity. When Noah fussed during his examination, Dr. Rodriguez didn't hurry through the appointment. Instead, he took time to soothe the baby, explaining to Emily what he was checking and why. "He's a beautiful boy," Dr. Rodriguez said, returning Noah to Emily's arms. "Strong, healthy, perfect weight gain. You're doing an excellent job as a mom." Emily felt tears threaten for the first time since the hospital. She had been so focused on her plans for revenge that she hadn't allowed herself to fully process the fact that she was now raising a child alone. "It doesn't feel like I'm doing anything right," she admitted. "The fact that you worry about it means you're already doing better than you think," Dr. Rodriguez replied gently. "Being a single parent is one of the hardest jobs in the world. Give yourself credit for what you've already accomplished." That conversation stayed with Emily as she submitted her application to Second Chances, a reality show that followed single mothers building businesses from scratch. The show offered a $100,000 prize and mentorship from successful entrepreneurs, but more importantly, it offered a platform. Emily's application video was raw and honest. A tired new mother explaining her vision for adaptive clothing for children with disabilities, inspired by her research in biotechnology and her determination to build something meaningful for her son's future. The producers called within a week. They wanted to meet her in person, they said. Her story was exactly what they were looking for, a brilliant woman who had lost everything but refused to give up. What the producers didn't know was that Emily hadn't lost everything. She had strategically positioned herself to lose the things that didn't matter while protecting what did. The house Thomas thought he had taken from her. Emily had never wanted it anyway. It was too big, too expensive, and located in a neighborhood where she knew no one. The joint savings account he had emptied. Emily had been moving money into a separate account for months, documenting every transaction as evidence of financial abuse. But the most important thing Emily protected was her reputation. While Thomas was telling anyone who would listen about his cheating wife and how he had been betrayed, Emily said nothing. She let him hang himself with his own words while she quietly reached out to their mutual friends, not to defend herself, but to check on them, to maintain relationships, to show through her actions who she really was. The contrast was stark and deliberate. Thomas, bitter and angry, driving people away with his negativity. Emily, gracious and focused on the future, attracting support and opportunities through her quiet strength. When the reality show's casting director called to schedule her audition, Emily was ready. She had practiced her pitch dozens of times, refined her business plan, and prepared for every possible question. But what she hadn't prepared for was the moment when the director asked about her ex-husband. "I understand you're recently divorced," the woman said, consulting her notes. "How do you feel about potentially discussing that on camera?" Emily smiled. The same calm, confident smile she had given Thomas when he handed her those divorce papers. "I think viewers deserve to know that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. My divorce didn't end my story. It just cleared the way for me to write a better one." The casting director leaned forward, intrigued. "Tell me more about that." And Emily did. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, Emily found herself standing in front of cameras for the first time in her life, introducing herself to America as a contestant on Second Chances. The studio was smaller than she had expected, but the energy was electric. 12 single mothers from across the country, each with a story of overcoming impossible odds and a business idea that could change their lives. "I'm Emily Chen," she said when the cameras rolled, Noah sleeping peacefully in her arms. "I'm a biotechnology researcher turned single mother, and I'm here because I believe that adversity isn't something that happens to you. It's something that reveals who you really are." The host, Miranda Santos, was known for her tough questions and ability to make contestants crack under pressure. But when she asked Emily about her divorce, Emily's response was measured and thoughtful. "My marriage ended because my ex-husband made choices that were incompatible with the values I wanted to teach my son," Emily said simply. "But I'm grateful for that clarity. It forced me to stop living someone else's version of my life and start building my own." What the audience didn't see was how carefully Emily had prepared for this moment. She had studied previous seasons of the show, analyzed what made winners memorable, and crafted a narrative that was both authentic and strategic. She wasn't just telling her story, she was controlling it. Her business pitch focused on adaptive beginnings, a line of clothing designed for children with physical disabilities. Drawing from her background in biotechnology and materials science, Emily had developed fabrics that could accommodate medical devices while still being fashionable and fun. The prototypes she brought were remarkable. Onesies with hidden ports for feeding tubes, pants with magnetic closures for children who couldn't manage traditional fasteners, and jackets that looked stylish but could be put on and taken off with one hand. Every child deserves to feel normal, to feel beautiful, to feel like they belong, Emily explained to the panel of investors. But when your child needs medical equipment to survive, finding clothes that work becomes a daily struggle. Adaptive beginnings doesn't just solve a practical problem, it preserves dignity. The investors were impressed, but it was Emily's response to their questions that really set her apart. When one investor challenged her on market size, questioning whether there were enough potential customers to justify the business, Emily's answer revealed the depth of her research and the strength of her convictions. "Sir, 1 in 4 people live with a disability," she said calmly. "That's not a niche market. That's a massive, underserved population that's been ignored by the fashion industry because it's easier to pretend they don't exist. Adaptive beginnings isn't just about making clothes, it's about making inclusion profitable." Behind the scenes, Emily was forming alliances with other contestants, but not in the traditional reality TV sense. Instead of playing politics or creating drama, she was genuinely helping other women refine their pitches, sharing resources, and building relationships that would extend far beyond the show. When contestant Maria struggled with her presentation about her catering business, Emily spent hours helping her practice. When Jennifer's childcare fell through before a crucial challenge, Emily arranged for Noah's babysitter to watch both children. The other women noticed, the cameras noticed, and most importantly, the viewing audience noticed. Meanwhile, back in their old hometown, Thomas was watching Emily's transformation with growing alarm. What he had expected to be a cautionary tale about a woman getting her comeuppance was instead becoming an inspiring story about resilience and reinvention. Friends who had initially seemed sympathetic to his side of the story were now asking uncomfortable questions about his version of events. The breaking point came during week 6 of the show, when Emily won the Innovation Challenge with a presentation that brought the entire panel to tears. As she accepted her $10,000 prize, dedicating it to all the mothers who refused to let other people's failures define their children's futures, Thomas realized that he wasn't watching his ex-wife struggle without him. He was watching her flourish. And for the first time since he had walked into that hospital room with divorce papers, Thomas began to wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. The 7th episode of Second Chances aired on a Tuesday night in October, and by Wednesday morning, Emily's life had changed forever. The segment showing her emotional visit to a children's hospital, where she had brought prototypes of her adaptive clothing to young patients, had gone viral. Social media was flooded with videos of children putting on her designs for the first time. Kids who had never worn normal clothes suddenly spinning in circles, giggling as they showed off outfits that made them feel like everyone else. The hashtag #AdaptiveBeginnings was trending nationally, and Emily's phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. Calls from investors, manufacturers, children's hospitals, and major retailers were coming in faster than she could process. But the call that mattered most came from an unexpected source. "Ms. Chen, this is Patricia Williams from Nike's Adaptive Division. We've been watching your progress on the show, and we'd like to discuss a potential partnership." Emily almost dropped her phone. Nike had launched their adaptive line 3 years earlier, focusing on adults with disabilities, but they had been looking for the right partner to expand into children's wear. The conversation that followed was surreal. A company worth billions wanted to work with a single mother who had been served divorce papers in a hospital bed 6 months earlier. "We believe in what you're building," Patricia continued, "but more than that, we believe in how you're building it. Your approach to this market isn't just commercial, it's deeply personal and authentic. That's exactly what we need." The preliminary offer they discussed would provide Emily with the manufacturing capabilities and distribution network to take Adaptive Beginnings global, while allowing her to maintain creative control and ownership of her designs. It was more than she had dared to dream when she first applied to the show. But Emily had learned to be strategic about opportunities. Instead of accepting immediately, she asked for time to consider the offer and continued focusing on the competition. She was now one of 5 women remaining on second chances, and each of the final challenges would test different aspects of their business acumen and personal resilience. The 4th challenge, a surprise media interview designed to test how contestants handled pressure and unexpected questions, proved to be Emily's defining moment on the show. The interviewer, a notoriously aggressive journalist known for ambushing contestants with personal attacks, had clearly done his research on Emily's divorce. "Some people might say that a woman whose own husband didn't trust her judgment shouldn't be trusted with other people's money," he said, leaning forward with the predatory smile of someone who thought he was about to break her. "How do you respond to critics who question your character?" For a moment, the studio was completely silent. The other contestants held their breath. The cameras zoomed in on Emily's face, and millions of viewers watched to see how she would handle this attack. Emily looked directly into the camera, her expression calm and confident. "I think those people are asking the wrong question," she said quietly. "The question isn't whether my ex-husband trusted my judgment. The question is whether my ex-husband's judgment was worth trusting, and I think the answer to that is pretty clear. He chose to abandon his family at our most vulnerable moment, while I chose to build something that helps vulnerable children feel strong." She paused, letting the words settle. "I don't need anyone's permission to be successful, and I certainly don't need validation from someone who confused cruelty with strength. My son will grow up knowing that his mother didn't just survive being abandoned, she thrived because of it." The interviewer looked stunned. He had expected tears, defensiveness, or anger. Instead, he got a masterclass in grace under pressure from a woman who refused to be defined by other people's failures. The audience erupted in applause. On social media, clips of Emily's response spread like wildfire, with comments praising her composure and strength. Emily Strong began trending alongside Nike's Adaptive Beginnings, and suddenly Emily wasn't just a contestant on a reality show, she was becoming a cultural phenomenon. That night, as Emily video called with Dr. Rodriguez, their friendship had deepened into something that felt like the beginning of love, though neither had rushed to define it. She felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Genuine happiness that wasn't connected to revenge or proving Thomas wrong. The finale of Second Chances was broadcast live from Los Angeles, with all 12 original contestants returning for the final elimination and winner announcement. Emily stood on stage, wearing one of her own designs, a elegant navy dress that managed to be both professional and maternal, with hidden snaps that would allow for easy nursing access. It was a perfect representation of what Adaptive Beginnings stood for: clothing that worked for real life without sacrificing style. Miranda Santos held the envelope containing the winner's name, but before opening it, she turned to address the audience about the unprecedented response to this season. "In 15 seasons of this show, we've never seen anything like the public reaction to these 5 women," she said. "But one contestant in particular has captured America's heart with her grace, innovation, and incredible strength in the face of personal adversity." Emily forced herself to stay calm, though her heart was racing. The prize money would be life-changing, but even more important was the platform and credibility that came with winning. She thought about Noah, now 6 months old, and sleeping peacefully backstage with his babysitter. Everything she had built over the past months had been for him, to give him a future where his mother's story was one of triumph rather than victimhood. The winner of Season 16 of Second Chances is... Miranda paused for dramatic effect. "Emily Chen, founder of Adaptive Beginnings." The studio erupted in cheers. Emily felt her knees buckle with relief and joy as confetti fell around her, and the other contestants rushed to embrace her. Through the celebration, she saw Dr. Rodriguez in the audience, holding Noah and beaming with pride. Her parents, who had flown in from San Francisco despite their initial concerns about her appearing on reality television, were crying and applauding from the front row. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came when the cameras caught a brief shot of the viewing party back in her hometown. Thomas sat alone at a bar, watching his ex-wife's victory on the big screen, while former friends deliberately avoided making eye contact with him. The man who had accused Emily of destroying their family was now watching her build an empire. During her winner's interview, Emily was asked about her plans for the future. The Nike partnership had been finalized during the filming of the finale, and she now had commitments from children's hospitals across the country to carry her designs. But more than the business success, Emily talked about the letters she had received from parents of disabled children, thanking her for creating something that gave their kids confidence and joy. "This journey started with the worst day of my life," Emily said, looking directly into the camera. "But I learned that you can't control what happens to you. You can only control how you respond. I chose to respond with purpose instead of bitterness, with action instead of anger. And I hope that choice inspires other women to know that their story doesn't end with someone else's betrayal. Sometimes that's just the first chapter of something amazing." After the show, Emily found herself at an after-party filled with celebrities, investors, and media personalities who all wanted to meet the season's breakout star. But the moment that mattered most was when she stepped outside for air and found Dr. Rodriguez waiting with Noah. "How does it feel to be a millionaire?" he asked, passing the baby to her with the gentle competence that had first caught her attention months earlier. "It feels like justice," Emily said honestly, "but it also feels like the beginning of something bigger than revenge." James, she had started thinking of him by his first name weeks ago, smiled. "What's bigger than revenge?" Emily looked down at Noah, then back at this man who had shown her what genuine kindness looked like when she had forgotten such a thing existed. "Building something so beautiful that you forget why you were angry in the first place." James, she had started thinking of him by his first name weeks ago, smiled. "What's bigger than revenge?" Emily looked down at Noah, then back at this man who had shown her what genuine kindness looked like when she had forgotten such a thing existed. "Building something so beautiful that you forget why you were angry in the first place." 3 months later, when Adaptive Beginnings launched nationally and Emily appeared on the cover of Forbes as one of their 30 under 30 social entrepreneurs, Thomas tried to reach out through their divorce lawyers. He wanted to discuss reconciliation, he said, visitation rights, the possibility of working things out for Noah's sake. Emily's response was swift and simple. "I'm sorry, who is this?" 2 years after Thomas had handed her divorce papers in a hospital bed, Emily stood in the boardroom of her company's new headquarters, looking out at a view of San Francisco Bay that had once seemed impossible to imagine. Adaptive Beginnings now employed 47 people, had partnerships with major retailers across 3 countries, and had been featured in documentaries about innovative entrepreneurship. The little boy, who had allegedly didn't look like his father, was now a toddler who looked exactly like Emily, running through offices where his mother was building an empire. Noah's second birthday party was held in the company's break room, with employees who had become like family singing happy birthday, while he gleefully destroyed a cake shaped like one of his mother's adaptive onesies. Dr. Rodriguez James had become Uncle James to Noah, though Emily suspected that title might change soon based on the increasing frequency of their conversations about the future. The success was intoxicating, but what surprised Emily most was how little she thought about Thomas anymore. Revenge, she had discovered, had an expiration date. At some point, winning became about the joy of building something meaningful, rather than the satisfaction of proving someone wrong. That perspective was tested when her assistant knocked on her office door with an uncomfortable expression. "Emily, there's someone here to see you. He says he's Noah's father." Emily looked up from the patent application she was reviewing. Thomas. After 2 years of silence, he had finally worked up the courage to show up in person. Part of her was curious to see what version of himself he would present. The arrogant man who had accused her of infidelity, or someone humbled by watching her succeed beyond his wildest imagination. "Send him in," Emily said calmly, "but ask security to wait outside just in case." Thomas entered her office looking smaller than she remembered. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair showed more grey than seemed possible in 2 years, and his eyes held the kind of defeat that comes from watching your own choices destroy everything you once valued. He stopped short when he saw the photos covering Emily's desk. Noah taking his first steps, Noah at his first Christmas, Noah at the beach with Emily and James, Noah surrounded by children at a hospital where Emily had donated clothing. "He's beautiful," Thomas said quietly. "He looks just like you." "Yes," Emily replied simply. "He does." They stared at each other across the gulf of 2 years and countless choices that couldn't be undone. Thomas seemed to be searching for words that might bridge that distance, but Emily found herself feeling oddly detached from his struggle. This man, who had once had the power to devastate her now, seemed like a character from someone else's story. "I made a mistake," Thomas said finally. "The biggest mistake of my life. I believed things that weren't true, and I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me." Emily nodded thoughtfully. "You did." "I want to make it right," he continued, his voice gaining urgency. "I want to be part of Noah's life. I want to be the father he deserves, the husband you deserved. I've been going to therapy, working on myself, trying to become the man I should have been all along." Emily stood up from her desk and walked to the window, looking out at the city where she had rebuilt her life from nothing. "That's good, Thomas. I'm glad you're working on yourself. Everyone deserves the chance to become better. So you'll consider it?" Hope crept into his voice. "You'll let me try to earn back what I lost?" Emily turned back to face him, her expression kind but firm. "Thomas, you're operating under a fundamental misunderstanding. You think what you lost was me and Noah, but what you actually lost was the chance to be part of the story we're writing. I'm not the same woman you left in that hospital bed, and Noah isn't the baby you abandoned. We're not missing pieces waiting to be completed. We're a whole family who's learned to thrive without you." The truth of it hit Thomas visibly. He had spent 2 years imagining a reconciliation where Emily would be grateful for his return, where his success story would be about winning back what he had carelessly thrown away. Instead, he was learning that some doors, once closed, don't reopen. 5 years later, Emily's story had become the kind of case study taught in business schools and featured in motivational speeches. Adaptive Beginnings had grown into a global brand that had revolutionized clothing for children with disabilities, generating millions in revenue while maintaining its commitment to dignity and inclusion. Emily herself had become a sought-after speaker, a best-selling author, and a mother who had shown her son that strength wasn't about never falling down. It was about how gracefully you got back up. Noah, now 7 years old, had no memory of the man who had questioned his parentage. His father figure was James, who had proposed to Emily in the same hospital room where their love story had quietly begun. Their wedding photo sat on Emily's desk next to her Forbes cover and Noah's latest artwork from school. Sometimes Emily thought about the version of herself who had signed those divorce papers with shaking hands, wondering if that broken woman could have imagined the life that waited on the other side of her worst day. The answer, she knew, was probably not. But that was the beautiful mystery of resilience. You never knew how strong you were until strength was your only option. Thomas had given her something valuable after all, the gift of discovering who she really was when everything else was stripped away.